Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in for this interview with Brian Birmingham, lead of Classic WoW. I'm sure a lot of you are dying to get straight into it. I just want to say a quick hello before we get there. If you don't know me, my name's Josh. I run a podcast called Countdown to Classic. If you enjoy what you're about to hear, or if you just enjoy WoW content that's, podcast-like or conversations about World of Warcraft Classic, please go and check out the show. Just search for Countdown to Classic wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever it might be. Guys, I don't update this YouTube channel very often, as you can see by the videos if you have a search around. I am somewhere else, basically, and there's going to be a boatload of content there that you are going to enjoy. Please take my word for it. So take the time after you see this to at least just check it out, give it a go, and see if you're into it. But for now, guys, please enjoy this interview with Brian. Look, I only had 30 minutes. A lot of you wonder sort of what happens behind the scenes with these Blizzard interviews on days like today when new stuff gets announced. It's not quite as shadowy or shady as so many people seem to think. Yeah, you send a few questions off to Blizzard PR that you would like to ask. They didn't change any of the questions I wanted to ask. It really isn't a big deal. They don't tweak and edit everything and craft the conversation to their liking. It's really not that shady. A lot of people, sort of conspiracy theorists out there think that's the way it goes. They're more just making sure that you're kind of not going to be a jerk. So in saying that, I had some questions that I didn't run by PR. I was a little bit cheeky, and asked Brian, and it's all fine. It's not a big deal. So unfortunately, you do only get 30 minutes literally to the second because he has other interviews to do on the day. A 30-minute interview is incredibly short, guys. I did the best I could on behalf of the community trying to ask the right questions. I hope I did somewhat of a decent job. Please do enjoy. Speak to you later. Okay, so 6 months ago, I had the pleasure and privilege of sitting down and talking with this person for the first time and really, really enjoyed my time with him. And I'm so happy to be able to say that I wasn't, offensive enough to have stopped you from coming back on the show. Brian Birmingham, the lead of Classic WoW, welcome back to Countdown to Classic.
Thanks, Josh. It's really great to be here.
It's lovely to have you. Now, mate, time is absolutely of the essence. If people don't know how these interviews go on days like this, I've got 30 minutes to the second. You've got to run to the next interview straight after this. Mm-hmm. So look, I've kind of boiled down to a top 10 questions that I want to ask you, and we'll get through them all as best we can. But okay, I just want to throw in a bit of a disclaimer at the top here, Brian, sort of for you, but also for the other listeners who are either watching the stream or listening to the show for the first time. There might be some burning questions that people are sitting on, like, oh, Josh, you're going to ask him about the bugs and the bots and the gold buying and all that. And sorry, I don't mean to sound facetious because all of that stuff is absolutely important. But Brian and I have talked about that stuff in the past, and not to say that that's one and done, but I'm not going to be raising any of that today. I've got far more pressing matters with Wrath of the Lich King Classic to talk about. So Brian, if it's okay with you, look, maybe if I can, how about we come back to that another day when I can get you for a bit longer? Does that sound like a deal?
That's fine with me. I'd love to come back.
Beautiful. Okay, look, let's move on to what we've just heard about today. And my first question, Brian, is just before we get to Wrath, in regards to the life cycle of TBC, and I understand that, number one, you guys can't say anything about dates. I'm not stupid enough to be able to, to sit here and go like, when's it coming? We PR dictates that don't tell them anything yet. That's fine. However, what I do feel the need to ask about is, people were a bit concerned, I guess is the right word, when they heard about some recent dates being announced in regards to Season 3 PvP and TBC ending a bit early, or absurdly early by some people's, take. How much longer, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I've already stuffed up. Do you feel TBC has been a little bit rushed, or is it all a necessity in order to get to Wrath in the right way?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair criticism that, not everybody's going to want to play at the same pace. And so for some people, it's always going to feel a little bit too fast. And then other people are going to say it feels too slow. And maybe we're leaning a little bit more on the side of faster this time. But I think it's always going to be a hard balance because there's people who want new things to do. And so there's people who are telling us like, oh, I'm so excited that that Zolman's coming out. I'm so excited that Sunwell's up on the PTR. I can't wait to get in there and try it. people who are doing Black Temple right now and who are saying like, this is great, but I want the next thing. And when can I get the next thing? And other people are saying like, oh no, I'm happy where I am. I want more time. Give me more time to kind of experience this at my own pace. And I realize that's a difficult decision and not really a great answer for anybody who's, in these two different camps. But, we try to do the best that we can to get things out to people when they're ready and when we feel like they're going to be good.
Okay. Has the dev cycle shifted at all on the fly? On the fly? Are things a little bit out of your hands at times?
I mean, it's always a little bit out of anybody's hands. We all try our best to try to plan ahead and make the best plans that we can. And to a certain extent, right, like we are constrained by the work itself, right? There's so much work to do, and we have to kind of do our best to get it done as best we can. And when there are things that we don't have time for, we either have to like decide, are we going to cut this feature? Are we going to like change this thing? Are we going to move this date? And we try to avoid that. Like cut this feature is one of those things that we tend not to want to do. Although that brings up another question or another topic, I guess, is features that we do want to cut, right? Like Looking for Dungeon that we announced today. Mm-hmm. But in general, like if we've decided that we want to do it, right, it feels bad if we're cutting it just for the sake of time on something like Classic, where the point is to go back and recreate this thing. And it would feel bad, like for instance, here's a good example in Burning Crusade. If we had done Burning Crusade without arena teams, we talked about that early on, and it was one of the things that was going to be really challenging. Was trying to fit arena teams in there, and we did like have to move the date back for that. We were originally planning to try to get Burning Crusade out sooner, and we needed more time to get arena teams in because we had completely removed all that system. Like a lot of the systems that we use in Classic are actually shared systems with Modern World of Warcraft. But since Modern World of Warcraft had long since abandoned arena teams, there was no support for that at all. So we were building that back up from nothing really. Like we went back and looked at old revisions and things like that, pulled them out, and then they didn't even work with the way the code had been refactored. So it was a big project to try to make sure that fit, but we really felt like it was important to include. It wouldn't have felt like Burning Crusade if we didn't, because it was such a iconic part of doing Burning Crusade. That said, we did announce today that we're actually going to be removing arena teams again, because we heard a lot of feedback from the community that there were people saying, like, I'm really glad you did this. I agree it wouldn't have been Burning Crusade without the arena teams. But now that we've played with them for a while, we actually remember how frustrating they were. We actually don't want them anymore. Could you please remove them for Wrath of the Lich King? And we are going to do that.
Very good. Mates, if I can just ask you along the same lines of life cycles of servers and everything, people enjoyed the TBC pre-patch, but I do remember some of the overwhelming feedback regarding that was once again about the length of it. So when we start to look at things like the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch, is that feedback that the team took on board at all? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you able to say how long are we going to be in pre-patch for Wrath of the Lich King without telling us when it's coming? Just what kind of time frame do you think people are going to be looking at? And then, sorry, if I can add a sort of extra credit question on top of that. You guys have taken some criticism for the amount of notice that is given in advance of patches, of content coming our way. Is that for a specific reason or that we don't know about? Or is there any plans to kind of let us in a little bit earlier and let the guilds know, hey, this PTR is coming, or hey, this content's coming, to give them time to prepare a bit better?
It is a lot of like trying to go as fast as possible and trying to make sure that we can give people what they're asking for as soon as we reasonably can. I don't know. I guess I should say a little less than, not quite as fast as possible, but as fast as seems correct, right? We think that generally we want to be able to get content into people's hands soon. And so we're trying our best to hit like the earliest dates we can. And so going back to your original question about the pre-patch, for Burning Crusade, we originally put the patch date. It was 2 weeks before the launch date is the way we do that. Like I always found the term pre-patch to be a little bit weird, but like, so there's the patch date, and then which changes all the systems, and then 2 weeks later we launch the game, and then you can go to Burning Crusade, and or it's Outland, I should say. And that did feel a little bit short for people. And part of the reason for that was because we were trying to like get things out as quickly as possible. We had, days that we were kind of, up against that we didn't want to like step on each other's toes, and we wanted to make sure everything kind of got out soon. And 2 weeks was always kind of what we had in our mind as the minimum. Like we wanted at least 2 weeks. And I'll tell you in terms of timing, the same thing I told you, I think I told people then, which was no less than 2, no more than 6. Like I don't know for sure how long it'll be. We kind of think 4 feels good, but again, like dates, trying to pin them down is really tricky. And that's really like the answer to your other question. Like, why is it so late that we announce dates? It's usually because we're trying to make sure that we're really going to hit it. What we really don't want to do, what makes us feel bad, and we're willing to do it if we have to. But what makes us feel bad is when we announce a date and then have to change our mind and change that date afterward, because then people get ready for it. They start making preparations. They like start planning things around it. They do all these preparations. And then if we have to change it after the fact, then they're like, oh my God, all these things that I did, like you messed it up. Like they were in, all for naught, or they were in vain, or, and that's frustrating. We hate to do that to people. So we really want to make sure that we have everything lined up, and everybody's on board, and where there's no obstacles in sight, and everybody's really confident in the date before we announce them. That said, we could probably gain that confidence sooner than we do. But it's always a learning opportunity for us to try to like figure out how we can be more confident sooner. But we're nervous about that risk of, if we say something and then something comes up at the last minute that makes us change our mind, then it makes us feel bad.
Okay, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Look, we'll rip into the meaty part of the discussion now. You've had your warm up, you've limbered up, and now we'll get you on the tough stuff. Look, and again, I apologize that I really do sound like I'm ripping through this at lightning pace. We really need to come back and do this like on a couch with corncob pipes and loafers and everything, and be a bit more relaxed. But look, let's go through the discussion about what, quite frankly, I think is a little bit of a bombshell announcement. No Looking for Dungeon tool will be implemented in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. This is sneaky huge. And look, I saw the interview that you guys did with IGN where you did extrapolate a little bit more about this information. And it's something that's already split the community into 100%. Mm-hmm. The Reddit thread is absolutely going off, over 1,500 comments in the few hours it's been since the announcement. And look, I've passed through it all. It really seems to be 50-50 for and against, right? Now, in that IGN interview, you mentioned that perhaps, to paraphrase what you said, maybe not necessarily it being all doom and gloom for people who did have hope for LFD being in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, because you mentioned that maybe there's an avenue for you to tweak other tools that might be able to be brought in. Things like you mentioned, I think the LFG tool that we've already got being made a little bit better. So before I get to, I'm team LFD, which is going to be upset a lot of people. Okay.
You wish we would do it?
Yeah, which shocks a lot of people, because everyone thinks, oh, Josh, he's hashtag no changes and hardcore classic guy. Look, I think LFD is a good tool that has a lot of toxic negatives that are ultimately outweighed by the positives. But we're not here to get into what I think. I want to know what the discussions amongst the team were in bringing this change about. Tell us about how this came up and why you decided to go with what you did.
Well, it's interesting. We talk about it a lot, and that's part of like we were expecting a little bit of a contentious reaction, or a mixed reaction, I guess that you could say, because there were like kind of two camps. But the earliest this conversation came up was actually before Classic even launched. We were just kind of shooting the I don't know what a good phrase for that. Just chatting really before Classic came out, right? Before we knew for sure how successful it would be. A lot of us that were working on the Classic team thought that it was going to be very successful, and thought that it was likely that people would ask us to do Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. But we didn't know, right? You can't really be sure. But even back then we were saying, like, if we got to Wrath of the Lich King, would we do Looking for Dungeon? And it was like, oh no, of course not, right? Like, that's the whole point. That's why we're going back and doing original Classic. Like, is to try to undo some of these things that felt like they changed the game so significantly. And even like going back to when we first introduced Looking for Dungeon, like 14 years ago or whatever it was, I remember as we were like, as that feature was being developed and being rolled out, we were talking around the office saying, like, this is huge. This is going to change the way people play the game. This is going to be transformative on the way people do play World of Warcraft. And so like, we really still feel that way going into this. It's like, there are people on the Classic team who do want us to do Looking for Dungeon, and there are people on the Classic team who say, no, we should not do it. And I'll go ahead and put myself in that camp. I'm in the camp of we should not do it. But I've also been very open throughout all of our previous classic interviews, that I don't think that it's a bad tool. I think it's good for what it does.
Oh, the tool's not the problem. The community and the way they use it is. 100% I agree with you.
Well, I mean, like, but they're not inseparable, right? Like there's a little bit of like both things there. Like there's something really cool about the tool when you're playing modern that you can like play over lunchtime, right? This is my go-to story, right? Like I want to sit down, I want to just get into a dungeon, get it done over lunchtime on my lunch break, and I can do that if I'm playing modern World of Warcraft. But classic is different, right? It's about making those kind of long-term lasting social relationships, those kinds of things that build up from trying to like reach out and see the same people over and over again, have like a conversation. And we've already seen like some people saying like, but people aren't talking in dungeons, right? You just go into the dungeon and you don't talk at all. And my counter example would be like, I used the current Burning Crusade looking for group tool in Season of Mastery. If you don't know, we included it there too. And so I used that to make a Wailing Caverns group the other day. And it was just like the brief conversation we had at the beginning where I just said like, hey, are you comfortable tanking? Like to the very first person I invited who was a warrior. And they were like, oh, I haven't done it in a while. I don't have a one-hander, but I can get one. I can do it, but I haven't done it in a while. And like just that brief conversation was enough that when I got like a healer right after and a couple more DPS, I just said to the group like, hey, we're going to go at kind of a slow pace. Everybody's kind of getting used to it. It's just so everybody knows before we get in here, it's going to be a little bit slow. And immediately someone dropped from the group. And I was like, oh, it's a good thing we got rid of him now instead of, in the middle of the dungeon. And so we immediately got another replacement, told them, hey, we're going to just go take it slow. And then we're in the dungeon and hardly another word spoken, but that just brief conversation setting it up kind of set us up for success. For now, we were all on the same page, that we knew that the tank was going to be, kind of getting used to it and getting into it. He turned out to be a fantastic tank. It turns out he had tanked for years before and just wasn't comfortable doing it on this character just yet. I was like, oh, this guy's fine. Like he just like, I think the only thing he did say was like what level his skill was at on his one-handed weapon as he was leveling it up. But it's that's the example I have is like, even those brief conversations set everybody's expectation and make everything kind of work well. And that's the thing that we miss with looking for dungeon is that setup time, that conversation, that just like that reaching out and talking to someone to make the group is the thing that kind of builds that foundation from which social things can grow, where you're like thrust in automatically. It's faster, sure, but it's faster in a way that means that you're not picking and choosing who you're bringing for a conversation about what your goals are that you're trying to do. And so you might end up in there with a bunch of people who want to go super fast, who are just like, I only got my lunch break. I'm playing on my lunch break. I don't have any time. And, you end up in there as like, no, I want to take my time and do like an extra thing on the thing. And, I want to try to get this achievement and forget it, right? No one's even going to talk to you about it. They're just like, burn on through. If you're talking through it, it might take you longer to get started in the first place, but you're more likely to be on the same page with all the people that you're playing with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
even if you disagree, I mean, like I know.
No, sure. And I'll say to people like, just me saying that, like I had this always something like, oh, Josh is pushing his retail agenda on the classic team. Like, oh, for God's sake, please. People are allowed to disagree on tools. Don't feel like that at all. But like, yeah, it's absolutely not me pushing something, but I do feel the need to ask just a couple of quick more questions in terms of,
sure.
I know probably what the answer is going to be to this one, Brian, never say never and all of that jazz. But, at this point, like, are we saying never, or is it like, we'll feel the community out and the feedback and blah, blah, blah?
It's like, I would say we're closer to not never than we ever were. Because like I said, we were saying never from the beginning, right? It's right. We started at never, right? And now it's like, oh, wow, actually, as we get to Wrath of the Lich King, it's more contentious than we expected it to be. And like I said, we have people on the classic team who are saying like, oh, actually, I would like it. So we're having those conversations now. I don't want to overpromise though. Like we really don't expect to add it.
That's fine. I really don't. I don't want to sound like I'm pushing you for it.
Dashed later, but but it is like it's a new conversation, and we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing.
Okay.
I would say like the important thing for us is to make sure that what we do add for the grouping tools, like the current Burning Crusade one that we're going to try to improve, are things that encourage people to have those conversations. Find the groups of other people who are interested in doing things the same way, bring them together so that they can make a group easily with themselves and then travel to the dungeon and help each other get to the dungeon. That part of the experience is what we want to keep. The difficulty of finding those people in the first place is not and you know, that's not the goal.
Fair enough.
The idea is to keep it from having an automatic, I just shove some people together and I teleported them to the dungeon. Those two things, the automatic grouping and the teleportation, are what we don't think we like.
Thank you for that. It's one of those things where this is a 2-hour conversation I'm trying to turn into a 5-minute question, and it just doesn't work. It is far more nuanced than this. Look,
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it in this format as opposed to like on Twitter.
No. I know what you mean. Look, we'll move on. And I hate saying that, guys, because people are like, no, Josh, keep going with the LFD stuff. There's so much more to talk about, guys. I do not have the time. Trust me, I want to ask more questions, but I can't right now. Look, another big one, Brian, this is a huge one as far as I've seen behind the scenes. Let's talk about the difficulty of Wrath of the Lich King and
Sure.
you know, phase 1. A lot of people are saying, oh my God, Nax is going to be a snooze fest. I hope they don't make the same mistake they did with phase 1 of TBC, where people were, again, split down the middle of, you know, should we divide up the content? We ultimately got, Gruul, Mag, and Kara in phase 1, as opposed to, you know, the pizza with the lot, so to speak. And some people feel funny about that, looking back on it now as being a bit, you know, quote unquote boring, and hoping to not have that repeat itself in Wrath of the Lich King Classic when, hey, phase 1, Nax, knock yourselves out. People are worried it might go on too long, it might be too easy. Has anything been looked at or talked about or changed in regards to the difficulty? And I'm not pushing a higher difficulty. I've had my mind changed. I think there should be cruisy content in MMOs, and Nax might be that cruisy content. But tell us what the team was thinking on this one.
Well, I would say broadly, we agree with all of the comments you just said, both that there is, it's very likely to be people for whom Naxxramas is a snooze fest, as you said, especially like anybody who played Classic and did Naxxramas in original Classic. It was definitely harder than it was in Lich King. And we saw a lot higher completion rates of it in Classic than we did in, you know, original Classic, right? When it first came out back in 2004, right? Naxxramas came out in, I think it was 2006, and it was really difficult. It was something like 1% of players played through it or something like that. And certainly we saw a much larger percentage of people play through this time around. So going into Wrath of the Lich King and having that dungeon come back as the introductory raid doesn't feel quite the same as it did back in 2004. That said, we realize that that's not everybody's experience. There are going to be people who didn't come back for Classic. So even though a higher percentage of the people who played Classic are going to have already done Naxxramas, there are going to be people coming in new who say, I just remember Wrath of the Lich King, right? This is why I'm coming back. I'm coming back for Wrath of the Lich King. This is what I want to play. I didn't want to do Burning Crusade. I didn't want to do Classic, but Lich King, that was where I started. That's what I have my memories from. And for them, Naxxramas is that introductory raid that they want to make sure that they can still do. So we're probably not going to buff the difficulty level of it. We're still talking about it. Like we're aware of it. And we do want to make sure that I'm pretty sure, I don't want to over promise here, but Sartharian, the Obsidian Sanctum, and Malagos, I think, are both also available in phase 1. And so you should be able to go and do those alongside Naxxramas. They're also probably not super hard, but I think they're a little bit harder, especially if you do Sartharian with 3 Drakes up. That should be a little bit of a challenge. But I get what you're saying. Like, we don't want to linger in that phase too long. I don't have any specific dates to give you, but we know that a lot of people are really excited for Ulduar, and that's going to be like the next step. And once we get Ulduar out there, there should be plenty of stuff for people to do. That's a really, really exciting dungeon that I know I'm looking forward to, and I hope everybody else is too.
So it sounds like the team might be flexible, at least on the time window that we sit in phase 1 for.
I'd like to. Again, it kind of goes back to your earlier question, right? About we don't want to rush things for people who want to have time to do it, but at the same time, we don't want to delay super long. So trying to pick a good time is going to be, another one of those things where we're going to have some people saying do it sooner and some people saying do it later. And we're going to have to try to do our best to bridge that gap and find a happy middle ground.
Okay. Brian, I've got a bunch of just over the halfway point. We're really only 8 minutes to go. I've got a bit of a lightning round for you. Look, okay. I'm going to do the lawyer thing where I say, please only answer yes or no to the following questions. We're going to blitz through it. I didn't run these ones by PR, but I
promised to only do yes or no.
I didn't run these ones by PR, but I trust you. There's nothing controversial here, so let's just zip through these. Are we going to get any fresh servers with Wrath?
I don't know. We're looking into it.
Okay. Dual spec available at launch. Yes, no.
Planned, yes, but possibly with restrictions. We want to talk about that one. See,
Okay.
these are hard.
All good.
Yes, no.
I presume Death Knight creation in pre-patch?
Death Knight is created a pre-patch, yes.
Okay. It seems like a silly question. I'm sorry to say it. I presume, again, like layers on launch and everything to smooth everything out?
Yes, layers on launch for sure.
Okay. 3.35 is the base?
For class balance, yes. For systems, no, because of things like LFD. There are other things also introduced in 335. A lot of them, along with LFD, that we are also planning not to include because they were for LFD, if that makes sense.
Tricky
examples of that are like the most controversial of those. I'll just go ahead and get this out there to make sure that people know about this. Is like the roll window, the loot window that pops up, and you can like say need or greed. And we added a third option in patch 335 to do disenchant if you had an enchanter in your group. And that was because you couldn't trade with people from another realm in the dungeon finder. We don't like the fact that it lets you use somebody else's profession without even having a conversation with them. So we aren't including that. It makes sense to include it if you're doing dungeon finder and it's cross realm, but we're not going to do that.
Okay. Last one might be a tricky one. A lot of people actually wanted to know about this. Will achievements be account wide or just like an in classic thing, if you know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. We're planning to have the achievement system. We're planning to have them be tracked on classic characters. In Wrath of the Lich King, the achievement system was character by character. And so there were, if I remember right, no account-wide achievements until I think Mists of Pandaria, I think is what first included the account-wide tracking. And so we are going to have the original character-based achievements. Okay,
so no retail crossover there, no talking to each other in terms of achievements.
Yeah, they should not talk to each other. They should be completely separate environments.
All right, gotcha. Okay, over to server balance, Brian. We talked about this the last time I spoke with you. You did give me an answer. Just really quickly now, it was right there in the survey that we got sent out a few weeks ago. If we fixed the server balance, would you be more inclined to play Wrath of the Lich King Classic? It was there. I did the survey, and it piqued my interest. So I saw that question. I thought I should ask Brian about that.
You put that in the survey?
That was in the survey. What's the plan? Where are we at?
I wish we had a plan. Oh my God, that's probably I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, right? But like that's probably more like whether or not we should devote resources into trying to find a solution. But I mean, we kind of already have, right? We spent a lot of time talking about what the solution could possibly be, and we never come up with one that we feel like is a good solution, because it always ends up being like everybody brings this up, right? Oh my God, my server's so unbalanced. Won't you guys please fix it? And what they mean by fix it is make someone else make a decision that they don't want to. It's like, well, what if I moved you? Could I move you to another server? Like, no, don't move me. It's like, well, of course, nobody wants to be the person that gets moved to fix this problem. And that's really the problem, is people have picked where they want to play and they're happy where they're playing. They just want someone else to do something to fix it. And I wish there was an easy answer, and I don't have a good one. And so I'm a little bit entertained by the idea that we put it in the survey, because I don't even know what we would do. Like, maybe it's just like I said, maybe it's just to kind of give us the idea that like we should keep thinking about it. But to be honest, we're already still thinking about it. It's just that we have not yet come up with an idea that we think actually would work without just making a bunch of people quit. Like, as an example, imagine we just took the two largest realms that are single faction each and smash them together. Okay, well, immediately you're behind login queues because we haven't solved that problem. So, okay, all right. And also, like, you've kind of lost some of that faction identity or the realm identity, because we're spinning up more layers, even if we can get past the queuing problem, right? Now there's tons more layers, and your realm is twice as big. Is this actually what you guys signed up for? That's maybe the best we could do. And even still, there's a lot of technical challenges to even get to that point, and I'm not sure it would solve the problem. So I don't have a great answer for what to do here, besides like, we are aware and we want to make sure we don't make it worse. Okay. I guess that's really that's what I would like to say we are thinking about. So going forward into Wrath of the Lich King, one of the new features that we add is Wintergrasp as this outdoor battleground that's supposed to like encourage world PvP. And of course, it also gates access to Vault of Archvalon, which is like this extra raid boss that drops really cool loot. And so if you're on the non-dominant faction and you can never win Wintergrasp, you don't get that raid loot.
Well, that's the thing. So if you're on a server where your faction doesn't exist, surely you guys have talked about this in terms of Wintergrasp.
Right. There's problems on both sides. Like neither side is happy in this situation, and so we need to figure something out to do with Wintergrasp. And one of the things that we're thinking about, of course, is whether or not we can get the match to start. If it's like, okay, we've got only Horde or only Alliance, what do we do to get somebody for you to play against? That's a separate problem. But also in the terms of like not making the faction balance worse than it already is, we don't want the underrepresented faction to feel like, oh my God, I'm just getting beat up all the time. Right. And I can never even get into that raid. I'll just transfer off. That's one of the things that motivates people to move off in the first place is feeling like it's already starting to tilt, or I'm always losing, or I can never get a foothold. I can never win. And then they just say, I just want to leave the server and go someplace where I'm the dominant faction. And that player decision to transfer their characters is what puts us in this situation where we have these unbalanced servers. So we want to try to avoid creating systems that incentivize that or make it feel worse.
Okay.
And that said, we still want it to be exciting to have world PvP. We want to have those objectives, but not make them feel so punishing that if you lose them, you feel like, oh, I've got to just, pick up stakes and leave. Right.
Okay, guys, I'd love to keep going with that, but literally my slot is almost up. Look, Wrath Engineering, you guys came in hard with leatherworking and the drums in TBC. Do you categorize what happens with engineering in Wrath with the rocket boost and the haste enchants and everything the same way? Are you tinkering with anything to try and not make engineering feel mandatory in a weird way, or are you leaving this one alone?
That's a really good question. I actually have not thought about that one yet, and we haven't really been talking about it. But if that's a hot topic, honestly, like that's how the drums came up in the first place too, was people in the community brought it up and they said, like, this is going to be a problem. You guys should do something about it.
This is not a hot topic. Please don't get me wrong. I have brought this up out of nowhere. I don't see anyone talking about it. I just thought it was an interesting
I will say,
head
like,
scratcher.
I'm interested to know if people do feel like there are any other problems like this, because we're not unwilling to act, but I had like nothing else is like bubbled to the top the way that drums did. And so we'll definitely pay attention. And if things come up where it does feel like it's really, in general, there's like anything that feels like you have to play this way or else you really can't. And like it's a whole category.
Yeah.
Like I'm struggling to like figure out exactly what to say, because like, I don't want someone to twist my words and use it to justify any change, but,
don't change it because then people will kill me.
But I mean, like, for example, like we said with leatherworking, right? If everybody feels like they have to be leatherworkers and no other profession is acceptable, that feels really bad. It makes all the other professions feel weak. It makes everybody feel like they're being forced to make the same decision, even if they don't want to. And that feels bad. And so if we have other things that meet those same criteria, where it feels like everybody has to do X, otherwise everybody feels bad, we'll probably act. But I don't know any specific topics where that's come up as we've been talking about Wrath so far.
Fair enough.
People think of them, let us know.
Look, real quick, I know you're not going to be able to say anything, and I don't want to make you squirm too much, but the guys on the team, Orlando and Tony, they've been talking about working on something new. We've seen the job go out there, software engineer, Blizzard seeking software engineers for experimental gameplay. I don't want you to say anything you can't say. Can I ask, is it Classic related or Classic adjacent?
I really can't say very much at all. Not really. It's really just to try new things and experiment with things. This is something we've actually had similar job postings up before. We're just putting a little more of a spotlight on them.
Okay.
But we are always trying to find new things to do. Like Classic started as one of these kinds of things where we're like, hey, let's try to do these things. And we've had plenty of others that we've started that never see the light of day. So I really want to encourage anybody who thinks that they would be interested in trying something that would be new and exciting and, new way to, spin the game. If you feel like you've got the skills and interests, please apply for those roles. But be aware that a lot of these things, like this is the nature of the games industry, is a lot of ideas start getting developed and get shut down. So if that sounds like something that you would like to try to experiment with and you think you've got the skills and expertise for it, then please apply.
Okay. Bethany, how are we going on time? Do I have time for one more? Or are we done?
No, that was the last one.
Okay.
We have to go.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Let's
really
do it again, man. These half an hour ones are so rough.
I totally agree. I would love to do some more.
All right. Thanks, mate. Have a good one. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.